Do you have an idea for a product or book? Or are you ready to go beyond in-service presentations? Well, how do you get started? And what if you don't have any business experience at all? Well, I have some great news for you. I'm Mei-Ling Chan, and I'm getting the nitty-gritty stories from parents, teachers, therapists, advocates, and people with disabilities who have created successful businesses, and they're sharing their intimate stories with you. Listen to us on the Exceptional Leaders Podcast and fast-track creating and building and sharing your idea with the world so that you can help more people.
Please listen carefully.
What is communication?
The act of taking a thought from my head and putting it into your head.
Essential behavior of life. We have the both blessing and responsibility of trying to foster.
It's the strongest way for two people to convey information to each other.
Usually what I have in my head to the outside world
draws us out of ourselves, draws us into that relationship, builds up our families. Without it, we'd be lost.
I think it's the ability to share your innermost feelings and thoughts with others.
Whatever it is that we do to express intent and achieve an impact.
Communication is the ability to express your needs, wants, frustrations, and desires to anyone that you feel needs to have that information.
Welcome to Speech Science episode 71, proud member of the Exceptional Podcast Network, live for the first segment right here on Facebook, and as always, able to be downloaded wherever you get your podcasts. Check out our website, speechsciencepodcast.com, which directly links you to our friends over at the XPN Network. Also, check out our Patreon at patreon.com/MWH Production, or you can give us a phone call or a text, 614-681-1798, or speechscience@gmail.com. It's Matt Hott, joined as always by Michelle Wintering.
Hi, Matt.
Hi, Michelle. And Michael McLeod.
What's up, buddy?
Hi, Michael. How are things going in our therapy realms? Michelle, it sounds like you finally got the dreaded sniffles I fought for the last 3 weeks.
I know. If you catch my pile of tissues that are off screen over here, I'm trying not to blow my nose while we're live.
Don't do that. At least mute it and turn the camera away from you.
Right, so you don't watch me.
How is life with baby speech science and burgeoning new Kentucky therapy license?
I'm actually up for the week in Ohio. Go figure. I know I make it really hard to keep track of me. But yeah, I'm up in Ohio for the week visiting family, and baby speech science is doing great. He's crawling all over the place now, causing trouble. He discovered the little door stopper springs recently, and it's his favorite thing to crawl for.
Oh, yeah. If you still need a 2-year-old to trial all your safety locks, I will give you mine for the weekend. You can take them.
Sounds good. I keep telling you to come down to Kentucky.
There we go. Michael McLeod, how are things out in, I keep wanting to say West Philadelphia, but I don't actually know what part of Philly you are in.
Definitely not in West Philadelphia.
I feel like I'm having deja vu. We've had this conversation before.
Maybe it's a conversation we've had every week. What part of Philly are you in?
I am definitely not in West Philadelphia. I live basically in Center City, pretty much north of Center City, in a little area called Fairmount, Francisville. So it's a bit of a newer area of the city. But yeah, and my clinic is in the suburbs out west of the city. I'm in a little town called Media, PA.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's where my clinic is. That's where I spend most of my time, and it's where I do most of my work there. But yeah, things have been great. It's been very, very busy. I've been traveling down to Maryland and doing a lot of work down there, doing lots of traveling, and things are just getting real busy at the clinic. I think this is really crunch time.
And Mike, you're licensed in a couple different states, right?
Yes, in Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Delaware.
Are you really?
Yep.
Wow. Look at you.
He lives in that borderland.
Good point. I live in borderland, and I'm not licensed in Indiana or Kentucky.
Come on, Matt. Join the multi-license land over here.
It'll happen.
Well, we want to hear from you, and we always tell you to give us a call or text us 614-681-1798, and that is exactly what Nikki did. Nikki is a first-year grad student. She says that she loves us. We love you too, Nikki. Also, she says that kombucha, GT's brand, I don't know what that is excellent, and it's an acquired taste, especially helpful for vegans who have difficulty getting into probiotics.
Look at that.
So
I'm telling you,
there's that.
live tasting with Matt.
On the probiotic train.
Hey, I will say this. And I'll probably lose any vegan listeners we've ever had. I was vegan for 35 minutes in undergrad. And honest to goodness, true story. What happened was, enrolled religions class and a Dr. Conway class, I believe, at Muskingum University. She brought in people from PETA. They showed us how they make hamburger meat. And my buddy and I said, oh my gosh, we can't eat animals anymore. That's terrible. So we left the class, walked up to the dining hall the whole way, talking about how we're going to start eating salads and what we can do to get rid of meat out of our diets. We opened the doors to the cafeteria, and the smell of cooking steak for lunch with baked potatoes. And our first thought was, well, the cow's already dead. And that was the end of my veganism after 35 minutes of walking from class to cafeteria.
Well, there's a tangent I didn't see coming.
We also want you to interact on all of our social media, such as Instagram. Michael?
The Instagram account?
I thought you had somebody had wrote to us on Instagram.
Yes, we did. I thought we were mentioning that with something else.
Oh, okay. We'll hold on to that. We are radio professionals.
Hold that story.
I guess we'll hold that story. Coming up today on this episode, we will be talking about burnout, or as ZDOGG MD called it, moral injury. We'll get into that. Also, we're talking about an unprecedented and significant step in the right direction for listening. We'll talk a little bit about that. Also coming up on today's show, Michelle Wintering, you had a chance to sit down and talk to one of the VP for planning candidates.
Yes, Yvette Hyter from Michigan. So that's coming up later in this podcast, but she is a great interview, and I hope you get to hear what she's all about.
But to start off, coming out of the ASHA Wire, this is an article from 2019, back in February. It's called The Unheard Female Voice. And as I have a tendency to dominate the show with my deep baritone male voice, I'll let Michelle lead us off in this one.
Oh, goodness. Well, it's definitely a good read. I'm actually saving it so I can go back and reread it a little further. But what was really interesting is talking about how women's voices are typically higher pitch, and that can be perceived as youthfulness and being young, which is not always a bad thing, but research has shown that youthfulness associated with less dominance in women, but not in men. And then it also talks about speech pathologists working with basically how can speech pathologists support women to sound authoritative in certain ways without necessarily changing their vocal quality. And some of the research was really fascinating, talked about interruptions between male to female, female to female, female to male, and it's crazy different in different studies they did, just interactions and meetings, measuring interruptions. I forget, I'll have to find the little stat for it in here. And then that a lot of higher up, sorry, I'm gonna sneeze, I think. There's that cold coming back on me. But you take Supreme Court justices, the female Supreme Court justices typically have over the years, they've lowered their voices.
Have they really?
Yeah, that was mentioned in the article. I need to find it, but it's fascinating. And it's true. I mean, think about it. When we try to sound more authoritative, men and women both, we lower our voice.
Huh. I guess that makes sense. I mean, I found this interesting because, like, I've had a couple transgender voice clients and talking about trying to either make the transitioning into female voice a little bit more, I don't want to call it passive, but a little bit less in your face, and then also trying to transition into the male voice, trying to get them to be more bombastic. I love that there's research behind it. I thought it was interesting at the end. They actually talk about how it's less about the person speaking and more about trying to change the listeners around them to get more female voices to be heard. I found that to be a little bit. The Jacoby says we're talking about a society-wide change, and that does take everybody making just a small amount of effort. I thought that was the most interesting part, and that's why I let you start off there, Michelle. Was me wanting to say something but not.
No, I appreciate that. I think it's the other part that stood out to me is where they said, let me find the interruptions in that study of how many times. Here you go. In a recent study published by the Journal of Language and Social Psychology, engaged 40 participants, 20 male, 20 female, 3-minute conversations. During the discourse, women interrupted men just once on average, yet men interrupted women 2.6 times, and women also interrupted each other at a rate of 2.9 times. But what they noted about that, which was really interesting, is that women tend to get to that familiarity in a conversation, more familiar interactions like you would with a friend, quicker than men. And so that could contribute to them interrupting each other more often.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Huh.
It's
Michael.
Interesting research. I want to kind of click all the link throughs on this article.
I just wanted to make sure that you were finished, Michelle, before I
You guys are the best. Look at that.
This really
We're learning.
But yeah, this is really a very, very well thought out and quite long article compared to a lot of the ones you find on the ASHA Wire. And being on part of the SLP community on Facebook, you do see a lot of complaints and sometimes some hate towards ASHA, but they really do quite a great job with the ASHA Leader and the ASHA Wire and a lot of the articles they put out there. And obviously a lot of them are based on overall autism and speech and language, things like that. And an article like this could really get lost in the shuffle. But with the field being 97, 98% female, I think this is a fantastic article that many people can really learn from. And I speak about this all the time, that what I've found is to be the best thing about being an SLP is how great and how wide the scope of practice is. I think it's amazing how all the different options that are out there and all the different populations you can work with. And I would assume that the smallest area within our scope of practice is the corporate world and doing some of the corporate trainings. And I don't think there's really any people in the corporate area that go through a bad experience at work and think to themselves, I think an SLP can help me with this. And this article is great advocacy for our field in this area and what an SLP can do with our training to help adults, successful, professional, educated adults in the corporate world, whether it be females or males working in this type of environment. So I think this is definitely an untapped resource for our field that could really help to expand us even larger. And I can see an SLP really helping someone and really benefiting someone in this area, in this realm, really using our expertise to really help them to progress in their careers.
The author is Stephanie Watson. She's a health writer, editor based out of North Kingstown, Rhode Island. And Michael, I think you hit on a perfect note that a lot of times we settle into the idea of what disability can we fix? What deficit can we bridge? And I know I'm working in home health care and I work in schools. And those are usually areas where someone has had a skill and they've lost it, or they don't have a skill and they're trying to gain it. I think Michael and Michelle, you guys probably are more likely to see situations like this where a young professional wants to lose their vocal fry, or they need coaching on using more assertive language to not be spoken over during board meetings. Have either one of you really done anything similar to this that's not necessarily deficit driven or delay driven?
The settings I've been in have all been insurance based, so it's not, this is going to be outside of a insurance claim, or probably outside of a school setting too. It's a bit of a merge of voice and social pragmatic language, right?
Right.
You've got both. I was reading the article and it felt like a review of some speech science things. Like puberty causes the vocal folds to elongate and thicken for men, that kind of thing. But I don't know, Mike, have you worked with anyone that's almost, I think it'd be great to be able to be almost a concierge SLP and work for consult with businesses and executives, but go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I've had a few adults reach out to me. I believe the vast majority of them were from India. I think some of them found like my website or they heard about me from one of my presentations or a conference or something, and they reached out to me in hoping for accent reduction to help them in the workplace, things like that. But it never really came to fruition. I never ended up seeing any of them. It never followed through. But it's definitely been there. So just the fact that they thought to let me look for, and my website is very obviously a pediatric website.
What is your website?
grownowtherapy.com. So it's very clearly like a 3 to college age website. That's pretty much how it is. So for an adult to see that and think, hey, let me reach out and see if this person could help me, that just shows, and we know as SLPs, some of the best clients we can have are the ones that are just incredibly highly motivated. And that's so hard to find in the pediatric population because they're not fully aware of their deficits and they have a million other things going on. But if you have an adult who, needs help in the corporate world, needs help with accent reduction, and they're highly motivated to improve, that could be some of the most engaging and fun therapy that you can have as a therapist.
I know when I was going through my leveling courses at Kent State University, I can't think of my professor's name, but I know she was Dr. Ann. She would work with newscasters on modifying their accent and getting the female newscasters to be more, I don't want to say believable, but more assertive, more reliable, someone you would believe presenting on the newscast. And I thought it was one of the most interesting ways to use therapy that was not what we were learning in class, which was articulation remediation or language milestones. I just thought it was super interesting. And now, that would be something that I would love to work with, but I don't know where to start to work with somebody like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of outside courses like CEU courses and quote unquote certification courses for accent reduction, where you basically just get a certificate from who knows where, saying that you have experience in accent reduction and you're certified to coach accent reduction. It's really just one of those money grabber kind of things from what I've seen. But yeah, it's really one of those things where maybe if you're fresh out of grad school, you might be more prepared because you've had a lot of that recent training. That's a really individualistic thing to who would be most prepared to do this kind of work. I would definitely need to do some research and some work on my end before I was able to see this type of person.
I think I love this idea of being a concierge consult SLP. It actually came up in one of the Facebook groups I'm in for speech pathology of people talking about connected, but not what we think as the more narrow area. Oh, speech is very broad, but
right.
Traditional speech language therapy, and that we almost need to market ourselves for some of those other populations.
I love it. I'm telling you, that is going to be how I retire. That sounds like an awesome job. That's all I'm going to say.
I think this whole discussion on this article, we're all nervous about interrupting each other, even though our podcast is much more familiar conversation, cut people off, laugh in the middle of it kind of thing.
We are doing really good at that, though. I will admit that. We want to hear from you, though. Head over to our website, speechsciencepodcast.com, and that's where you can tell us, without anyone interrupting you, your thoughts. You can email us, speechsciencepodcast@gmail.com, or give us a phone call or text message, 614-681-1798. Or if you're a typer, not a talker, you can find us on Twitter at SpeechSciencePC, or hashtag us SpeechScience or SSPod. Thank you, Michael, for setting that one up.
Yes, sir. Hashtag SSPod.
SSPod. I love it. As I do the Jimmy Fallon double finger hashtag.
Oh, yeah. Him and Justin Timberlake, right?
Oh, our next article coming up out of ASHA again. And this time talking about more, I guess, on the audiological side, but safe hearing. And what they want to do is it's going to be referred to collectively as WHO-ITU H.870, the global standard on safe listening devices and systems, basically saying that they want devices to be equipped with a warning or some sort of label identifying that if you listen to 40 hours a week to volumes higher than 80 decibels, it could cause damage to your hearing system. And I love this idea. Like, I'm practically almost halfway deaf in my right ear from years on radio. And I used to listen to with the one headphone completely off on the right side, and I couldn't hear as well, so I would crank it up. And I'm pretty sure that I've ruined my hearing on that side.
I think this is absolutely fantastic. I think nowadays you see headphones on just about everybody. Everybody has a phone, and every phone comes with headphones. So
Yes.
everybody has headphones. Everyone's listening to music at some point. It's not just when you're at the gym or going for a run like it was back when I was growing up. Now it's you're in the car with headphones. You're walking with headphones. You're at work with headphones. You're on your computer with headphones. And as technology increases to kind of have that privacy and to be one-on-one with the technology, having those headphones is beneficial. So having this disclaimer for what we know as clinicians is the science behind hearing, I think this is great. I'm on board.
And 80 decibels, I'm pulling up the speech banana again, but it's not that, I mean, 80 decibels is not that loud when you think about it. I mean, it's decently loud for a sustained period, but you can get up there with even vacuuming or
True.
playing an instrument or
a plane flying at 1,000 feet.
But we all should wear hearing protection more often. I know a lot of concert venues and sports venues now are lending out for children under a certain age, the sound canceling headphones. More and more places are doing that, which I think is great.
Yeah, I've seen that more often. Like at the Super Bowl when like the game-winning quarterback brings his baby on stage.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen that. I've seen the baby will have like headphones. I've noticed. I don't remember ever seeing that in the past, but I think that the past couple of years I've seen babies on the field with headphones.
Yep, in sporting events that like my friend's kid at a hockey game, and he's got a 3-year-old, and he's got the headphones on.
I used to never wear hearing protection because I thought it was the uncoolest thing in the world. And my son's godfather, who's also one of my best friends, Dr. Spencer Miller, he's an audiologist. And he gave me such a hard time about not taking care of my hearing because I guess my son was out mowing the grass next to me and he was wearing his ear protections, but I was just wearing earbuds to listen to music. And he would just got on me about not wearing hearing protection while mowing the grass. So I went out and bought a pair of hearing protection. And that is night and day difference. I can actually hear things when I'm done mowing the grass. I love hearing protection now, and that sounds so bad as an SLP that I didn't believe in hearing protection until about 4 years ago.
Oh, instead of the short-term hearing impairment after getting done mowing for 30 minutes.
Now, I will say this. When we bought our son the Nintendo Switch for his birthday, the salesman said, oh, and just so you know, it comes with headphones. He should be able to wear the headphones. That way you don't have to listen to it. And I just looked at him and I was like, no, I'm not giving my 5-year-old earbuds to listen to a video game and ruin his hearing now.
You just like the Nintendo music.
You want to be able to imagine what he's doing, even if you can't see it.
That is true. Evidently, that will probably get us banned from YouTube or something. That little humming sound.
No, that was the remix.
Now, just a thought.
Yeah.
Because I know you can set parental things on a lot of different games and devices. Can you limit the volume on them?
I don't know about on the Switch.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think
that should be a tool they add on there.
That should definitely be a tool.
Yeah, but I don't know about you guys. My old Sony Walkman and my first generation iPod had like noise limiter, and like you would do it and then you'd be like, I can't hear myself over walking across the bridge. So then you turned it off and then cranked it up as loud as you could. So, I mean, I think they need, as hearing becomes more important, also the stuff that we use to protect our hearing becomes less uncool, I guess you could say, because, you see drummers wearing hearing plugs now that you've never seen them wear before, and they look cool. And I think that's part of the thing as well. It's great to have a warning label saying that this is going to make you go deaf, but having something that people actually want to wear is just as important.
I mean, the same thing happened with bike helmets and skiing helmets. I remember going skiing in high school and nobody wore a helmet. And by the time I lived in Colorado, you were the odd person out if you did not have a helmet on, and people would put stickers and paint them, and it became part of your ski outfit and your bike out. Now for kids, they have mohawks and unicorn hair on them and all that stuff. The kids are excited to have their bike helmet.
Exactly. We want to hear from you. Oh, sorry, Michael.
I was just going to say that's a great comparison. It's pretty much just a matter of time until Apple makes a product that makes the hearing protection cool. So we're waiting on Apple to make it trendy.
And just like those headphones, we get them for our kid, we could paint them a different color or put designs or stickers on them.
I'm on for it. I'm all good with it. We want to hear from you. Head over to our website, speechsciencepodcast.com. And from there, you can email us, speechsciencepodcast@gmail.com, or give us a phone call or text message, 614-681-1798. Now, the big thing that we wanted to talk about today is our burnout. And before we do anything else, I want to play a quick clip of a video.
What over 50% of healthcare professionals are experiencing, they call it burnout. It's exhaustion, low productivity, and a feeling of deep cynicism.
What do you guys think? We're going to have the complete video from ZDOGG MD in our show notes. What's your guys' initial thoughts on burnout and then what he calls moral injury?
So how does that video go after that? Like, what is his stance on burnout?
Oh, that he says that burnout is basically pushed by always making sure that we're trying to do the most and almost looking at our patients as dollar signs instead of the needs of our patient. So basically, he's saying that it's not burnout. It's more what we call moral injury, where we as healthcare professionals are so engaged at trying to get the best care for our patients that we become almost discouraged or beaten down by the system because we can't spend 2 hours with our patient. We have to spend as little time as we can to get cleared by insurance before moving to the next patient.
Mm-hmm. So he ties in productivity, documentation, which could apply for us to school settings as well, of the high caseloads and
for sure,
like that learned helplessness. I think of that's what I compare it to is back to Psych Class 101, right? Where you, the example I always remember is where you study really hard for a test and you fail. You don't study and you fail. So what's the point of studying?
Yeah, pretty much.
Right? That's learned helplessness. So I think what he's describing and what I often think of as burnout is when we get to that point. professionally, that we feel like I have such a big caseload, no matter what I do, I can't serve this population as I want to.
Mm-hmm.
And so he calls it moral injury, that it's not burnout. It's not just being worked too hard. It's that you're emotionally and then physically, because it's all tied together.
He links it to almost similar to PTSD from soldiers returning, where a soldier doesn't want to go out and shoot somebody, but because they see it on the front lines and they come back, it has injured their moral center that they need to heal. And he says it's similar to us in healthcare, where we don't want to see people get hurt or injured or whatever that they're going through, but instead we have to basically shut down and move on to the next person.
Yeah, I think burnout is something that really most people feel within their jobs, within their careers. I think us as SLPs, we spend so much time with OTs, PTs, other special educators. We have our incredibly large network of SLPs on Facebook and social media that we're always, and typically when you get a group of strangers together with small commonalities, one of the best ways for them to do is to complain about things. Like when you're in grad school in your cohort, one of the best ways to get to know your classmates is to complain about your teachers, and everyone can share in and crack jokes, and you build that camaraderie. And that's
I never did at OU. OU was awesome.
And that's definitely what happens on social media, is a lot of the complaining and a lot of the basically bashing of speech, and a lot of it is warranted, and a lot of it is those true people's experiences. But burnout is definitely a real thing, and I think it hits us so hard as SLPs is because within this field, as opposed to so many other jobs, we have to always be on. Like that's one of the best ways for me to describe it, is we always have to be on. It's almost like we're constant performers. Every time a new student comes in, a new client comes in, it's almost like the curtains open and you're there on stage in front of an entire audience. And you have to be a brand new person for that session, based on that kid's interests, what gets them engaged, what gets them moving, tracking the goals, doing the paperwork aside. You have to be energized and on, and it's tough, and it's tough to keep up with that hour after hour, day after day, year after year. And that's why I feel like burnout is real, and it's so prevalent within the SLP field.
Unfortunately, I think the term burnout just gets overused to an extent, because we get burned out of a lot of things. It's not just work. We get burned out of, day-to-day activities too. And so it was interesting to me that in this video, which I know we linked to, but that he changes that terminology.
Yeah.
He's using language, what we do, to describe it in a more intense manner.
I've been a subscriber to ZDOGG MD for the last 2-3 years, mainly because he makes parody videos, and I love parody videos, and his parody videos all have something to do with medical field. But Michael, you couldn't have been more right when you said that we're always on. I realized this early on when I did home health care. I walked into the end of a PT session, and nothing against PTs, but the patient was doing their reps and they were learning to count. PT was able to have a conversation with me and the patient, not about the therapy, because the patient was doing therapy, and the PT was at times saying, oh, get your knee a little bit higher. They were doing a wonderful job. But I realized in that moment how different our two jobs could be, because I can't take a break from asking a WH question to a person with aphasia. I can't take a break when I'm working with a dementia patient and ask them how their kids are doing, because it is a therapy question. It's not like we're walking around the living room with the walker doing that.
Exactly. I think there's a lot of our SLP listeners out there that could really relate to what Matt just said, and it's really it's something we've all experienced, and we've all been able to really cherish those moments when we're able to have a little bit of small talk with the client, and have a little bit of a parent interview, or just have a little bit of a small talk with the parent. Oh, hey, how was your weekend? What's been going on? You know, those little moments of building rapport. One of the most exciting things about getting a new client is, you know, before you start doing any speech goals, anything therapeutic, is you have to build that rapport. And that's one of the most refreshing. It's almost like a deep breath and a break for us. You can have any desk job, any corporate job. You can be in marketing, in finance, in administration, graphic design, anything. There's days where you could get up out of your desk, away from your computer, walk around and take a breather. We don't always have that luxury. So we have to plan accordingly for that and kind of cherish those moments when you're not providing the therapy, and you create your own individual plan of self-care of how am I going to take care of myself to ensure that I can keep up this pace of always having to be on.
Have you guys, either one of you, been close to burnout or a moral injury?
I would say I'm still a little too new to the field.
How long have you been in the field, Michael?
I graduated grad school in 2015.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Michelle?
Yes.
You have burned out.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I would say, I mean, I think there's more to that story, but there was some circumstances that but I switched jobs. Yeah.
The job I had before this, this is an honest conversation, and please do not call any weird hotline. I have already worked my way through this, but there would be days on my way to work that I was just hoping that I would get in a car crash so I didn't have to go into work. Like, that is the pinnacle of being burned out, when you go, well, if this semi doesn't really signal and he hits me in the front end, I might get out of work for today and maybe tomorrow.
But that's
real.
What job was that?
Speech therapy. It was just another placement before. Yeah. This was about 4 years ago into my field.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was in a rough job as well, where I just remember I would take the longer route to get to work just because it meant driving on a scenic road. Just to try to.
But, you know, I went to an ASHA training on burnout, and literally the lady said, what you need to do in the school system is at lunch, turn out your lights, put on soft music, and close your eyes for 20 minutes. That'll fight burnout. It doesn't work.
But it's coming from a good place, right?
It is.
Even try this essential lavender oil.
I have retail therapy behind me. That fights my burnout.
There you go. But I think that it's missing the bigger picture that can help short term, that can help kind of recenter yourself. And if you get yourself into a routine, whether it's exercise or reading or detaching yourself completely from anything work or speech related, spending time with family. I mean, we all have those things that kind of bring us back to where we want to be, and we're ready to go back to doing.
And Michael, I hope you never have burnout. I honestly don't. I hope you never do.
Honestly, I've almost taken the approach that it's almost inevitable. And I think if you kind of take that mental mindset that there's going to be those bad days, the days are going to come where I'm not going to enjoy what I'm doing. And there's going to be, there's that constant roller coaster of life of the ups and the downs. And there's going to be a string of days, whether it be days, weeks, months, where I'm going to feel really burnt out. I think kind of mentally preparing myself for that, I think will kind of in a strange way prepare me greater for it.
Yeah, mine wasn't so much, it was not just like one day I woke up. It was just like, man, I can't believe that they still do this here. I need to make a change. And then it was like, eventually I got tired of trying to make the change, and I just started thinking about how to get out of there. And then eventually I found Fairfield, where I'm at now, and I love it. But it was a rough go. My wife thought I was going to quit the field after 3 years, or was worried that I was purposely going to try to crash my car to not have to go to work. And I was like, I'm not going to purposely crash the car, but if someone bumped it, I would totally use it to get out of work.
And that is a learned helplessness. That's depression. That's
I realize that now.
And I think we need to, look out for each other too.
True.
Yeah.
Reach out to that coworker.
If my CFY was 10 months instead of 9, I would have been burnt. I would have been burnt out. Like it was rough with the hours, and sometimes it's your environment. Sometimes it's the placement, it's the environment. It could even be the specific students and families that are just not the right fit for you. And that's what's driving the burnout. And just like we spoke about before in terms of scope of practice, sometimes a change of scenery, you hear that a lot in sports when like players get traded from one team to another. Oh, he just needed a change of scenery and he'll do better. But now really just applying it now to this is sometimes a change of scenery can do wonders.
And that ties right in with the Instagram commenter, right?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. So on our Instagram page here, we posted a nice post called "Don't Quit," which was for all you SLPs experiencing burnout, and it was a little prelude to us discussing it this week. So we had a question here by the Instagram user Senuzi, and his question was, let me make sure I have the right one. It's always great when our listeners engage with us online. So it was. I
love it.
Such a nice thing. So he asked, what if school made speech pathology look so desirable up until your 4th year, and then you considered quitting? So he's basically he or she is still a student in grad school going through some externship placements, and the externship placements have not been a positive experience so far. So for all you grad school SLPs out there, and also you licensed SLPs out there, when you're in a bad environment, whether it be a job or an externship placement, and you're recognizing this is just not for me, this is not good at all, especially if you're so early in the stages of becoming an SLP, do you continue doing it? Do you stick it through, get your master's, do your CFY and stay? Or do you consider leaving the field altogether and starting fresh?
Well, and I think I'll add as well for the licensed SLPs, especially if you're in grad school, right? If you're finishing this program, that there are a lot of speech pathologists who, just like we talked about earlier, don't necessarily work directly in a traditional speech pathology setting. So we have a broad spectrum of jobs that we can work as licensed SLPs. And then there's jobs that are related to our field that might be a good fit as well. And that it is never, I will say this now, because it's never too late in your career, 10 years into a career, 20 years in a career. Speech pathology has a lot of different niches that if you want to pursue a different area, it is possible. It's going to take some legwork, but it is possible. And that there's, hopefully, if there are a lot of things, you've been in school and speech pathology sounded so great, there must be some things about it that were really appealing. So we can try to find something connected with those.
I'm going to say on the other side on it that, like, you're so close to getting your CFY done. Get your CFY done just so that you have it. But if the field's really not for you, don't stay in it. This field is very draining. It can beat you down very quickly. And we just talked about that. But on the flip side, it can be so very rewarding. But if it doesn't feel like a good fit, you don't want to look back in 30 years and say, I hate speech therapy. I never should have done it. Because this field can be, like I said, can be so rewarding. From getting the kid that's locked in an eye gaze device, to getting that adult back to work, to getting an accent modification for a job placement. Those are all very rewarding. But those moments are 1 out of every 5 patients or 1 out of every 10. They are wonderful. The high is so high that it replaces any low that you could have been feeling. But to get to that high may take 3 months. It may take 6 months. It may take 2 years of working with a patient, but it's going to be worth it. But if you don't feel that that's what you want to do, there's no shame and not staying in the field. The field is very difficult. We are literally working with students and patients at their lowest. And Michael, you hit on it before. We have to perform. We have to be on because our patients need us. And if you don't have that, it's hard to fake it. And our patients can see if we're not there in the moment with them. And it can be very scary and very sad having to tell a patient that you've been with for a year, hey, I think we're getting to the time where we have to change your diet or you're going to die. Or working with a student with a degenerative disease and you say, hey, you're an awesome kid, but let's look at getting you that AAC device now so that in your last couple years of life, you can still be that awesome kid. It's very tough. And you need a certain internal drive that if it's not there, it's okay. It's okay. No one will tell you it's okay, but it's okay to find a different field if it doesn't fit for you.
And I've worked with a ton of incredible SLPs. I've worked in great networks, met some amazing SLPs that have revived me and made me feel great and increased my zest for the field in this career. And I have met other SLPs that have literally learned about this field by finding those Forbes list of 10 careers for the future. And, oh, speech pathology is on there. I bet I could do that. And somehow they find themselves in grad school and all of a sudden, boom, you're in front of a client, you're in front of a student. And that's not the way into this field. There's enough grad schools out there. They're popping up every year, new grad schools everywhere, graduating 30, 40 brand new SLPs a semester. So there's enough out there. There's obviously areas that are dire for SLPs, but if you're not someone that pictured yourself becoming an elementary school teacher or working with geriatrics or truly doing something in this field besides finding ways to be comfortable as an adult and find something you think you could do, don't learn about SLP through a career list, a top 10 career list. This is a field for people. My entire life, I knew I wanted to work with kids. My mom worked with kids for years and years and years at a school. So it's in my blood. It's in my DNA to work with people. I could never work in front of a computer all day or be in a cubicle or have your typical job. But it's this, like Matt said, this field is absolutely not for everyone. And
that's okay.
Yeah. And thankfully, the vast majority of SLPs I've met are absolutely incredible people, amazing people that will do anything for their clients and work their asses off and just do an incredible job. And we are absolutely blessed to be a part of this field when you really take a step back and look at it.
And I'll add in too, especially for students, but also for people who are looking at maybe trying to switch areas in speech pathology, which can be a really big change, even though you're still a speech pathologist, if that's what you're looking at. Because of how awesome the vast majority of any SLPs I've worked with, just like Mike has referenced, asked to shadow. I mean, I would love it if somebody, how many times have I had students or even other SLPs who just work in a different field come hang out, especially when I was at the School for the Deaf and the Blind, because that is such a narrow population to work with, where we had SLPs come and just spend the day to see that part of speech pathology. And I think the vast majority of speech pathologists that you reach out to, no matter where you are in your field or in your student studies, if you said, can I come shadow you for a day, as long as that's okay with HIPAA and all that other stuff, they're probably going to say yes. So check it out. Don't feel like you're locked in just because you are finishing up that master's degree, because there are a lot of areas within speech and there are a lot of things related to speech if there are things in it that you like. Yeah.
That was a very heavy topic, guys. Whew. I loved it. Woo. We want to hear from you. How are you battling burnout or moral injury, or how have you done it? Head over to our website, Speech Science Podcast. speechscience.com. You can email us speechsciencepodcast@gmail.com or give us a phone call 614-681-1798, or you can text that same number. Coming up after the break, Michelle, who did you speak to and why is it important?
Hey, I spoke to Yvette Hyter, another one of our ASHA candidates, and she is from Western Michigan University, and she was fantastic. I want to bring her back on the show, so I'm hoping that we get a chance to talk to her down the road, whether she is in that ASHA position or not. So I hope that you all enjoy hearing about her and her research, and I think she enjoyed being on with us.
Awesome. That'll be right next. You're listening to Speech Science.
This podcast is brought to you by Pearson, the company behind the CELF, GFTA, and the brand new PPVT5 and EVT3. These new, easy-to-use vocabulary assessments are brief and reliable for 2 years, 6 months old, to those 90 and beyond. Learn more about these new tests at pearsonclinical.com/exceptional. That's pearsonclinical.com/EPTIONAL.
Hey everybody, this is Michelle. I have the opportunity to sit down with Yvette Hyter, Dr. Yvette Hyter. She is an ASHA Fellow and a Professor of Speech, Language, and Hearing Sciences at Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Her research and teaching focuses on the influences of culture on communication development and disorders, with emphasis in the areas of pragmatic language and social communication with speakers of African American English, and with children with histories of maltreatment and prenatal alcohol exposure, as well as culturally responsive and globally sustainable practices. She's also recently published and co-authored a book on culturally responsive practices and writes about competencies needed for global engagement. And why we have her on the podcast is because she is also in the running for a position with ASHA. So hello, Yvette.
Hi.
Welcome to Speech Science.
Thank you.
Thrilled to have you, and thank you for making the time to come join me tonight.
Sure.
You're recording, and I know this will probably go up in the next week or so, but we're recording on a Wednesday evening. And first off, can you just, what ASHA position are you in the running for, and why?
I am running for Vice President for Planning.
Okay.
And I'm really excited about the opportunity to run for this position. As you know, strategic planning is sort of the backbone to any organization. And it's the position that where you can work with others to set priorities, to give direction in the way that the direction to the organization. You're guiding that direction. And it also includes, in this position, is planning, but also a liaison to the Multicultural Issues Board and to the International Issues Board. And I feel I have very strong skills in all three of those areas. I've had 20 years of leadership and planning in national and international organizations. For example, I was chair of the Child Language Committee in the International Association for Logopedics and Phoniatrics. Mm-hmm. I was a coordinator for 617 of ASHA, which is the Global Issues and Communication Disorders, Communication Sciences and Disorders. And then
that's always a mouthful, right?
Right.
Every title. Yes,
and then
communication science disorders, whatever we have.
I have a strong record of multicultural work, a strong record of international work. I've co-chaired university steering committees on diversity and inclusion. I chaired a college committee on diversity and inclusion. You mentioned the book, and I co-teach a study abroad in Senegal. So I have a lot of strengths to bring to this position, and I think it fits me well, and I'm really excited to have an opportunity to help set standards and promote evidence-based and interprofessional, culturally responsive, and globally sustainable practice in our field.
What would you say, I know you kind of touched on what you hope to accomplish, but what would you say is the number one issue right now for speech pathologists and also audiologists?
Yeah. I actually think there's kind of three, but my top, if I had to hone it into one, it just seems like ASHA has done a lot to prepare the membership for providing services across cultures. And, we've done a lot, but I think it's so imperative now that we are able to engage in effective practice with this ever-changing society that we're living in. So we're increasingly interconnected. The world is more complex, and there are lots of ASHA members and students who are becoming speech language pathologists and audiologists and speech scientists and language scientists who want to go abroad and provide services. There are ASHA members who's already living abroad. And there's increasingly movement of people from outside of the U.S. into the U.S. and vice versa. And wherever we find ourselves as practitioners, we need to be prepared to provide effective and sustainable services. And I think for me, it just seems like that's one of the biggest issues that we're facing, is being prepared for that.
I guess, how do we measure, how do we make sure that it is effective and is sustainable?
Yeah, well, I think we're beginning to have these conversations about competencies in the membership, right? And we all are there's already ethics, a body of ethics that guide our practice. There are language learning theories, or theories that guide the practice as a speech language pathologist. But we're just beginning to start having this conversation and start writing and researching and publishing about the types of, you need a little different information. You can't just focus on content. You also have to focus on how you develop relationships. How do you develop partnerships when you are working in, cross-culturally and also outside of the country in which you are most familiar. So we're beginning to see some of these ideas trickle into the literature, which I think we just need to do more of that. It needs to be in classrooms. I also think, and this may not be the most popular position, but I think it needs to be in our standards of practice, and it's not. Cultural competence is, and I'm putting competence in air quotes because I prefer cultural responsive practice, that term, but that is in our standards of practice. But how to engage internationally or in a global context in a way that you're developing a partnership and you're being reciprocal, that is not in our standards of practice yet.
Now, that almost made me think, because I know one topic that's come up with ASHA recently, and we've brought it up on the podcast a little bit about me. I have licenses, or I've held licenses in 4 different states now because we're a military family. And I know there's the discussion of that compact that ASHA is working towards to hopefully, like other professions like nursing and I'm not sure what else, who have some cross-state lines licensures. Is that applicable? Is that something that we can, I know other countries have different licensures as well, and you worked in another country. You said you take students to Senegal, but I'm not sure exactly the question I'm going for, but I'm curious how that can relate. Like, what is ASHA's role in that, just in our own country, but then also abroad?
Well, I think that currently what ASHA is involved in, I hope I have the name of this, we
can look it up later and add it to the show notes too.
With different countries. And so ASHA has been invited to different countries in different regions of the world to help buoy, maybe that's the right word there, but to help kind of support the types of services that people who are already working in those countries would like to see. And so I know that so ASHA is doing some conferences, collaborative conferences in these different regions of the world. So that's one thing that ASHA is already doing. I'm not so sure there could be like a license that is the same, because the resources and the manpower is different. Let's take, for example, if you're working in Senegal, my understanding from interviewing a couple of speech language pathologists there, that there are about 5 speech language pathologists in the city, in Senegal, but concentrated in the primary city, which is Dakar. When you think about going out into the rural areas, it's there's not much services being provided there because it's just difficult to get to. There aren't people there. And so we really need to think about how practice looks different. It's not going to look like it does in the United States, and it shouldn't. The license isn't going to be, there may not even be licensure. It may be providing support to community members to be able to implement services or to do assessments, or, so it's going to look, we need to have a flexible mindset. If we're, as we continue in this direction, and we have no option, right? Because this is the way the world is happening. We're just increasingly interconnected. And so we have to have increasingly mental flexibility in order to think outside of the box of how services might look. And it's really not up to us, right, if we're working in other countries. Other countries know what they need, and they know who they need, and they know exactly what they need. What often is not available are the resources to put into place what they know they need. And so as we are working internationally, we really need to join people where they are, be invited, to be invited to partner with them. And then we're doing what they know that they need. We're helping them.
I like how you put that, being invited to partner with them.
Yeah.
So you did touch on, you said, when I asked you the number one issue, but you mentioned that there's 2 others. You have your top 3. So
there are a couple of others that I was thinking of, is that we need to continue to increase the diversity of the membership, right? So we have, I pulled up some numbers. We have there's about 191 plus speech language pathologists, audiologists, speech language hearing scientists, right, that are certified through ASHA. Only about 8% are members of a racialized group, and who would consider themselves people of color.
Okay.
There's 5% would identify as Latinx, right? So Latinx or Hispanic. There are about 530 international affiliates, so people who are ASHA members who are working outside of the country. And then we also have about 5%, or maybe a little bit under 5%, who are male. And so, those numbers are pretty small when you could think about the number of people in the United States. How many males are there in the United States? I don't have that number right at the top of my hand, but I do know
a lot more than the 5%, right?
Right, a lot more than 5%. And then there's 28% of the U.S. population are people of color. So, but they're 8% of ASHA. And so it's important to build the skills in the professionals that we have to be able to work cross-culturally and internationally. But I think it's also important to grow the profession, continue to incorporate more and more diversity in the people who are providing those services, because we're working everywhere, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and that you made me think of the last 2 years before my family, we recently moved to Kentucky, but I was in El Paso, Texas, right on the border of Mexico. And my coworkers, all except for a couple, were fluently bilingual because they were native Spanish speakers and Mexican American themselves. And the vast majority of our patients also had Spanish in the home, if not the primary language, their L1. So it definitely forced me to brush up on my Spanish skills, but also kind of opened a window into another part of speech pathology where you really have to think about beyond English, standard
Absolutely.
English. Yeah.
Absolutely. And do you know how many ASHA members identify as bilingual?
I don't. How many?
6%.
6%. Wow.
6%.
Yeah.
Those are 2018 figures.
Wow.
Yeah.
I know. And I'm thinking that the clinic I worked at, all of them were.
Right.
Right. So it's very regional, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Although I do have hope because more and more, I teach at Western, so in Kalamazoo. And so you have different cohorts of students coming through, and more students are bilingual or have some facility in another language.
Okay.
Every year there's more and more.
Yeah.
Which is promising, I think.
Definitely. Yeah. And my second language is American Sign Language from working with deaf, hard of hearing, which is its own culture and communication.
Right.
But that's definitely our country's only getting more diverse and more cross-cultural generations. So.
Right. Yeah. Well, I am working on fluency in Spanish, and French I use when I'm traveling in West Africa.
Okay.
And so it's really, excuse me, it's really challenging to get up to be in a place where you feel like you're fluent, particularly when I'm in English so often. At home, I speak Spanish with my husband, but most of the day I'm talking and thinking and reading in English. So it's just, I know it's a challenge.
The reading part was a challenge too when I worked with students whose first language was ASL, because there's no written form to ASL. So they have to really become bilingual themselves, because to read and write, they have to write in English.
Right.
So always a challenge. So I am fascinated by your research just based on the bio, and I started clicking through some different things. Is there anything else topics-wise for the ASHA position that you wanted to touch on before
before you go into that, the other thing, I think, just one other critical issue, I think that we should be. There's kind of two, but so one, just quickly.
I want to hear both. So
okay. One is thinking about interprofessional education and interprofessional practice. That's a big thing that we've been talking about in the American Speech Language Hearing Association. It's a medical model, but we have adapted that language, and we've always been, maybe not always, but for a very long time, focused on collaboration across disciplines. And but one of the things when you are preparing pre-service speech language pathologists and audiologists, the curricula that we have and the structure of the institutions make it very difficult for IPE and IPP activities to occur. And, I think it would take a complete revamping of the way we think about offering education to model an ideal educational experience, for individuals who are learning to work across disciplines. And that, that takes a long time, and it will be very difficult to do. But I see that as there's this interest and this push for us to be more engaged in interprofessional education, interprofessional practice, but we are existing in institutions and structures that make that really difficult. And in some places, even in my department, it still happens, but it happens at the stress of trying to put that on top of, or within a structure it doesn't work well within.
Mm-hmm.
And then the fourth thing I think is important is thinking about how we continue to reach populations that have minimal means for paying for services. And of course, if you are a child and you're in the school system in the United States, there's the Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act, which requires you to have services and free appropriate public education. But if you're outside of that age range, if you're not in school, is there a pro bono mechanism that we can offer, individuals who don't have the means to, or the insurance to pay for services, which increases accessibility, I think.
Mm-hmm. And
so
I think very often, myself included, that ASHA members, we miss that elections are even going on, and that we can, take a role in what ASHA is doing and have a voice somehow.
Right.
And that might be through the candidate that, we're supporting. But I guess what would you want to tell members about this election and about what ASHA is doing or could be doing?
Well, I think it's, there's a very small number, and I don't have that number right at my fingertips, of people who actually vote. And it's just so important because the people that the membership is voting are voting for are those people who are helping to shape, for example, in this position, helping to shape the next steps or the next few years of ASHA's direction. Mm-hmm. And it's just really important for your voice to be heard through the candidates that you select. And I think, all three of us are very well equipped for that position. And there are some similarities and there are some differences in terms of our focus, I believe. And I just think that the ASHA membership needs to be able to weigh all the options and determine, which direction they agree that the organization should go in and vote for that person.
And forgive me, I feel like maybe I should know this, but how long is the position elected for?
It's 3 years.
It is 3 years. Okay.
Yeah.
That I couldn't remember. All right. Well, the next part is I really wanted to touch on get to know the candidate and who you are and your specialization and why did you become an SLP? We can start there.
Well, it's sort of a long story, but I'll try to make it fast.
Okay.
I was in junior high school and they had a career day. And as a child, I was always this person who I collected. There was these little word puzzles in the newspaper. So I would always collect those word games. I did crossword puzzles. I did words. I was always fascinated. My sisters and I made up a language. We walked through Hughes and Hatcher with my parents, speaking this pretend language and thinking that people would think that we actually were speaking another language. So I was always very curious about language. And then, so when I went to the library in my junior high school for this career day, they had this little file, 3x5 card file. And the librarian asked me what I liked. And so I told her about puzzles and word games and things like that. And she said, well, read this card. And it was the card about speech language pathology. And I think at the time it was just called speech pathology. And this would have been in the late 60s, early 70s. And so I read about it and I was like, this is what I want to do. I went home and told my parents.
How old were you then again?
I was in junior high school. So I think I was probably in the 5th grade.
Wow, I love it.
What is that like? I can't remember what age it was, but I'm pretty sure it was in the 5th. I was at the beginning of junior high. And I went home and told my parents, and they my parents are really amazing. They had the forethought of getting me involved with a speech language pathologist. So I candy striped, and it must have been over the summer at a hospital that my aunt worked at, and with the whole candy stripe uniform and everything. And my job, I was working in a rehab center department that has speech language pathology, audiology, occupational therapy, physical therapy. And I was assigned to the speech language pathologist. And so my job was to select the children's book and read to a little boy who was in a coma after a car accident. Every day I picked out a book in the reading center, and I go in there and read to him. And one day I walked in and they were running around, where is Yvette? Where is Yvette? Where is she? And, my heart was beating. I was like, what did I do? That I thought that I did something wrong. They said, no, come in here. And the little boy had awakened.
Wow.
But he wasn't recognizing, he was being afraid of other people. And so they asked me to say something to him. And he said, Mama. He recognized my voice.
Wow.
Because I was reading to him. And that was it. I knew from that moment that this was my calling. This is what I was here to do.
Wow. I can't, I think a lot of SLPs that I meet don't have that moment so young. That's pretty beautiful.
I feel really, it feels really good to have that. I mean, it was very powerful at the time. And the field has, changed a lot. But the other beautiful thing, as you know, about being a speech language pathologist is that you can change settings, and they're so different, right? So it's almost like learning a new job every time you change, because working in a hospital is very different than working in a school, even though you have skills that transfer, but you're learning a new system. And so that it keeps it fresh and exciting.
Absolutely. Your title's the same, but your environment is completely different.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else about you? Family, hobbies, obviously your research interests. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what's going on with that currently.
Yeah. Well, in terms of my research, I'll talk about the hobbies in a little bit, but I'll talk first about the research interests. I'm currently working on, it's already developed. I have developed a assessment measure that looks at social communication and pragmatic language. And we're piloting or collecting some data in Greece and Brazil. We're starting data collection in Cyprus and in the US. And this is, and I'm collecting it in the Children's Trauma Assessment Center where I work or supervise students. And so it's very exciting. We have enough data from Greece to start analyzing that data and testing if the items on the instrument are working and working well. It has several different components.
Wow.
There's a parent checklist, a teacher checklist, a child CELF checklist for children who are 8 and older. There is a classroom observation form that the speech language pathologist would use. And so the parent and teacher checklists are really like those tier 1, if you think about response to intervention. So it's that tier 1 mass screening that can be given to every child. And then the speech language pathologist classroom observation form would be used by the speech language pathologist to observe this child in real life settings. It could be a classroom, it could be home, it could be on the playground, wherever this child is engaging with others, to determine whether or not there are social communication or pragmatic language concerns.
And you mentioned your place of work, the Children's Trauma Assessment
Center. Mm-hmm.
Tell me what that is.
Yes, so this is a transdisciplinary assessment center there that was started. We just celebrated our 19th year.
Happy birthday.
That was in February. And so The director is a social worker, a professor named Jim Henry. And there's occupational therapy involved, speech language pathology, a pediatrician. Sometimes we have students who are nurses, and sometimes we have students who are counselors, or learning to be psychologists. And so we really are engaged in transdisciplinary work, but we primarily provide comprehensive assessments to children with histories of maltreatment and prenatal alcohol exposure. And it's really difficult work. And because when you think it can't get any worse, somehow a child walks through with a history that is worse than the story you couldn't even imagine. But then, the child walks in and he or she is just a child, right? They are still playful and laughing. And so, we really work on just trying to hold their stories while also providing a comprehensive assessment that helps them get the support and the resources that they need to be successful. And we primarily do assessment, but not only assessment. There are social workers who have training and licenses in providing certain trauma-informed or trauma-based interventions. And so we have an opportunity to do that. I've been working on some thinking and writing, although it's not published yet, about trauma-based intervention from the perspective of speech language pathologists. With this population, there's also a need for audiological service because children who have exposure to alcohol, there is a connection between middle ear difficulties and children with those histories. So it's very important, very difficult work, but very important work. And, I wouldn't want to be doing anything else really. So I supervise students. All of the faculty members have students that are placed there for practicum. And then the Children's Trauma Assessment Center also employs counselors or social workers to do some of they're there like all the time, writing reports and getting background information on children and preparing files. So it's really a wonderful place.
Wow. And how long have you been in that facility?
I was one of the founding organizers of the Children's Trauma Assessment Center.
19 years. Hey.
Yeah, so 19 years. There was 5 of us, and it was Jim Henry, Connie Blackpond. Connie Blackpond is a social worker and counselor, and they were actually working in the field and realized that there was this disconnect between children who were in DHS services, in the welfare system. There was this disconnect between the kinds of services that they were getting and what they needed. And it was very disjointed. And they had this dream of having this cohesive clinic that would provide assessments, a comprehensive assessment for this population, so that, going into care, out of home placements, or children that have these histories would have some comprehensive information about what they needed to support their development. And they had the foresight to invite other disciplines. So I was invited to the table. This is when they were planning as a speech language pathologist. Dr. Ben Atchison was invited as an occupational therapist, and Dr. Mark Sloan, who's a pediatrician, was invited. And so we all kind of sat around and we envisioned like how we wanted this clinic to look. And we really wanted it to be transdisciplinary and not interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary, where you had like this connection between the disciplines. And so we wanted it to be transdisciplinary. We dreamed about it. And we, you know how when you first open up the doors, you have this trepidation. Is anybody going to show up? You know, but we had done a field, you know, a small field study to get a sense of if we built this center, would there be interest? And there was overwhelming interest. But you know how you're not quite sure people are going to follow through. Well, 19 years later, we still have, I mean, it's sad how many people there are that need the services that are in the DHS services system, that are in out-of-home placements. But we're glad we can provide this kind of service to that population.
But it shows how much of that need is there.
Yeah.
Awesome. And anything about yourself, hobbies, interests, including speech, of course, but.
Well, of course, you know, I still do crossword puzzles and I still work games and they still fascinate me, languages. But I also am a violinist. I have played violin since I was 9 years of age. I have terrible performance anxiety. So if I'm playing in my own living room, that's great. If I'm playing for an audience, I'm like it really stresses me out. But I love it. I'm in love with the violin, and I'm absolutely sure that I will be playing till the day I die. I also play piano, but not as often as I do the violin. I crochet, and my main crochet projects are Afghans, like big bedspreads.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
I actually had connected with a woman who's an incredibly talented crochet artist, I would say, because at a craft fair in El Paso, Texas, and I bought all our nieces and nephews matching characters that she to match these books, including, I don't know if you've heard of the story, The Gruffalo. It's a really funny little story about.
I haven't, but I'm going to write down that name. Yeah.
And she created, once you look it up, you'll see, but it's this monster with this hodgepodge of descriptions and a purple wart on his nose and that kind of thing. And she made one. She crocheted a Gruffalo for me for the book.
That's great. And I guess the last thing is that as I headed toward my 60s, I'm rather close there. I've started back running. I was always a runner and as a younger woman, but I thought that that hobby could take me into my older age, and it feels good. So I'm doing that and entering races and having fun.
Yeah, are you signed up for any races currently?
I am signed up for a 10K at the Borges Run for the Health of It here in Kalamazoo. Nice. One of my sisters and I, we kind of, that's what we do together. We kind of travel around and run in these races.
Hey, it's an excuse to travel too.
Right. Yeah. So
I've only been to Kalamazoo once, but I hear wonderful things. It was back in college for a volleyball tournament.
Oh,
a long time ago. And just on our podcast recording the other night, you know how the Google Doodle, when you go to Google, they'll celebrate different anniversaries. On Monday was the gentleman who created the tactile tiles for the blind, right?
I saw that.
And isn't Western Michigan, I believe you guys have a big orientation mobility.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely, we do. And that's in the same college that we are in.
Oh, really? Because I mentioned working with the deaf, but I worked at the Colorado School for the Deaf and the Blind, and that's where, I mean, I learned so much from the O&Ms. And I was telling Matt and Mike, our co-hosts, that I want to bring a O&M on for an interview because they work on a lot of, especially those language concepts that we work on. So.
Yeah, so the blindness and low vision department is in College of Health and Human Services, and then there is I think up the street and across the street is a school, but I think they work closely together, the department and that school. So yes, it's
I know the Colorado School for the Blind had a couple staff members who graduated from Western Michigan.
Okay, great, wonderful.
So the name is out there for many different things, I'm sure. Is there anything that I haven't touched on that you would like to share? Especially relating to your run for the ASHA position, of course.
Right. I think in terms of some things I'd like to accomplish is to, in collaboration with other board members, is to not only advance ASHA's strategic objectives, which would, for the Vice President of Planning, I think would focus on Objective 6, which is increasing diversities of the membership. 7 would be international engagement, and then 8 is cultural competency or responsiveness. I'd like to increase the diversity of the work toward with other board members to increase the diversity of the membership, and then increase student involvement. I don't think I mentioned that before, but in decision making. So the kind of like growing your own population of future leaders in the field.
Mm-hmm. And you being a professor, you work with the new
students,
the soon to be SLPs.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Matt had a really good question that reminded me. He asked one of the folks who came on for a position. He said, okay, let's say tomorrow you are suddenly in charge of all of ASHA, right? What is the first thing you would do?
Well, for me, I would put in to the standards some global competencies.
Okay.
That's what I would do.
I like it.
Yeah.
Good point. Well, I have really enjoyed speaking with you, and
thank you.
I think we would love to have you back on just for your expertise and experience too, to hear more about what you're doing research-wise. So as study progresses, maybe we can bring you back on the show. Sure,
that sounds fine. Sounds great.
Great. And we'll keep encouraging the members to find out about all the candidates and make sure
and to vote. Right? That's right.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. It's been a joy, and hopefully maybe in some point we can meet in person and not just over a screen.
Well, I hope so. Maybe at the next ASHA, huh?
Yeah, we're hoping to, Matt and Mike and I are hoping to all three be there. So
wonderful. Okay,
maybe
great.
do a live recording as well. That would be fun. I haven't been able to go since ASHA Denver, so it's been a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I will.
Thank you, Michelle.
Welcome back to Speech Science. I'm Matt Hott, joined as always by Michael McLeod.
What's up?
And Michelle Wintering.
Hi, Matt. I always have to be on edge a little bit. I don't know who you're going to say first.
And that's why I do it. Actually, what it is that a little behind the scenes here, what we do is we record on Zoom. And on Zoom, your guys' pictures sometimes change position. So that's the order that I introduce you guys in from top to bottom.
All right.
So right now it goes Michael, me, Michelle. But some days it's Michelle, Michael, me. It's Zoom is weird. But we like it. We use it.
Yes, we do.
So coming up on April 15th, I'm just kind of forward selling real quick. ASHA elections open up on the 16th. So on the 15th, we're going to drop our ASHA elections special. And what that is we're going to talk a little bit about everyone who's running for different positions. And also we're going to rerun all 3 VP of planning interviews in their entirety as kind of like a wonderful way to kick off ASHA elections. So that's going to come the week of April 15th. And that may be a Facebook Live opportunity where we talk about individual candidates as a group. So I'm kind of excited for that.
That'll be awesome. I think that'll be very helpful for our listeners too.
I'm stealing your idea, Michael, where you wanted us to do that last year, and I forgot that there was elections happening.
Nice.
Now we're helping a lot of other SLPs know that it's happening. See?
April 15th. We'll have the link down below. Guys, it's almost summertime, and I'm sorry, it's almost spring break, and then summertime, which means vacations. Have you guys, either one of you, been to Sesame Place?
As a kid, yeah, that's over here.
Did you really?
As a kid, yeah, that's over in
right near him.
That's in my neck of the woods in the Northeast.
Okay,
it's right
so they
near
say
Philly, right?
Yes, it is. Yep.
So they say it's the first theme park in the world to be designated as a certified autism center. They receive the staff members receive training in sensory awareness, motor skills, autism overview, social skills, communication. I want to take my kids here. You've been, how awesome is it? And then can you look back on it as an SLP and see how it's autism center?
How it's an autism center?
Yeah,
I think some of that's new. I
How
think
it's
that's
designated as a certified? Is it?
Yeah,
yeah.
newer designated.
Oh yeah, that's all new now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah, I think the Philadelphia Zoo is also an autism center as well.
Is it really?
I believe so. I think it's been certified
speech
as
science road trip to Philly to Mike. And
That's right.
We
Come
can
through. We can all sit in the room together and record.
Well, it's awesome. I love being able to go to a movie and then see like a sensory awareness movie time being offered, or something like this. I love this whole idea. It's all about inclusion, and it's awesome. I really do love it.
Exactly.
And they mentioned having, like you said, sensory spaces or quieter room areas. It's not just kiddos with autism that will benefit from that. Any kid could benefit from that if needed, whether it's a meltdown or tired or just vacation can be exhausting at times. Parents can benefit from that.
And this is true special needs advocacy. If you're not in our field or you are not directly related to someone with special needs, this is how you're most likely going to be educated about this stuff. You're going to see signs for an autism-friendly movie showing, or signs at the zoo, or signs at Sesame Street for autism-friendly, and that's when you're going to recognize, oh, okay, so that's what it's all about. This is a good thing, and that's how information is going to be spread. So this is a very positive thing that word is getting out there.
And it's all done through the International Board of Credentialing and Continuing Education Standards. They have a link as well to certifiedautismcenter.com and some of the other CACs across the country. It's the Nickelodeon Universe in Minnesota, Mall of America, Discovery Cove in Florida. Let's see. Dolphin Cove in Jamaica, Sesame Place, Colonial Quarters in St. Augustine. I'm just kind of flipping through a couple others. Yeah, so it's kind of cool to see so many places trying to get trained and welcome our patients, our students, our children with autism.
Way to go, Sesame Street. Philadelphia knows what it's doing.
True.
We get a bad rap sometimes.
That's because Will Smith left there.
That's true. It is.
Oh, let's send this thing home. This has been a nice and long and in-depth and deep episode. We'll start with you, Michelle. You made it through the show with your sniffles.
I did. I know. My pile of tissues is over here still.
Hey,
That's
man,
okay,
I made it through 3 episodes where it sounded like I couldn't breathe through anything but my mouth, so I get it. What's coming up for you in this next week?
Well, actually, I didn't get to tell you. Last minute, I went to the IDA conference, the International Dyslexia Southern Region Conference in Louisville, just up the road from me. It's only 40 minutes away. And I found out last minute last week on about Wednesday that this was going on. So I was able to go to one day of the conference on Friday and do some CEUs, meet some awesome people. But it was actually, most of that day was a rights law training. And Pete Wright is a pretty well-known special education attorney who's worked on some pretty big cases. And it was a good refresher on IDEA things for me, but also some case studies, and met a lot of student advocates who I've met more across the table from me as a school SLP in IEP meetings, and some professors and people in related fields, and a woman that I might try to bring on for an interview. I told her about the podcast, so we'll see.
Woo! Way to sell speech science, Michelle. I love it. Michael, are you selling speech science or no?
I'm always selling
on
speech
Instagram,
science.
yeah.
every time I bring like someone who's like a applicant comes in, like looking for like I guess interested in the clinic, like another SLP from the area, one of the questions I always ask is, so do you listen to Speech Science?
Do you really?
I always do. I just did it yesterday.
They're going to create some like ACLU law about Michael asking about what your favorite podcast is.
I was 2 seconds away from asking her for her phone and subscribing.
And putting 5 stars.
That's when I used my self-directed talk and said, Michael, that's inappropriate.
Way to do what you teach people. I like it.
That's right. I was close to doing it though.
I've invited some people to our Facebook page and then made them like it. So, you know, you can do that.
They're always like, okay, fine.
Oh, for me, I got nothing. Spring break starts on Monday of next week. I got to get through 2 more days or 3 more days of school-based therapy, get through a couple of IEPs, and then I am on vacation mode except for home health care.
You're getting there, bro.
Getting there.
What
I'm
are
loving
you
it.
do to relax, Matt?
Sleep till 7. I have a 5 and a 2-year-old. There's not much sleeping in our house after 7 a.m.
Yeah, fair enough.
A nice change of scenery. I like it.
That is true. We want you as a listener to tell us what you like, so head over to iTunes and make sure at the end of this episode you hit those 5 stars and give us a little bit of love. We appreciate it, and it helps us keep bringing you stuff that you want to hear. Also, go to our website, speechsciencepodcast.com, and then email us, speechsciencepodcast@gmail.com. Our opening music.
Real quick, any of our school SLPs going on spring break, #SSPod, and let us know what you're doing to fight burnout.
Send us the beach pictures, y'all. If you're going to Disney, I'm jealous, and I will tell you what to do, and it's to go left. Always go left at the Magic Kingdom. Our intro music is Please Listen Carefully by Jazar. It's licensed under an attribution and share alike license. Our bump music is The Spellbreaker by Tritachyon. It's licensed under an attribution license, and that may be changing soon. I just got an email from a wonderful husband of a listener who's creating us some new bump music. And our closing music is The Slow Burn by Kevin MacLeod. It's licensed under a Creative Commons attribution license. In the immortal words of Janice Wright, always be a willow because the oak will crack under pressure. For Michael MacLeod and Michelle Wintering, I'm Matt Hott saying so long, everybody.
Nice work.
I'm dancing to the invisible music.
That was a good one.
Ooh, that was a long one.
That was a heavy.
This has been an Exceptional Podcast Network production. Speech Science is edited and produced by MWH Production. Please follow Speech Science on Twitter @SpeechSciencePC and like our page on Facebook. For more original podcasts, please visit exceptionaled.com and rate and subscribe to our podcast anywhere you get your podcasts.